thing. Here we go again.
Science.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's a brand new day.
Good morning.
Good thing that I don't have dangerous brain powers, or right now you'd be in 1,000 little pieces.
Now prepare to experience the most outrageous man on radio.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
The only station that matters.
Okay.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
This is insane.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
And finally, we got it. We got the intro in order and everything checked that I'm deselecting now was checked. The title of this show is not showing because I didn't put it in. There's always something. There's always something. Anyway, it says it's about time. And the subtitle or main title, or however way you view it, is, and in conclusion, and there's somebody in the chat that goes by the same name as me, ROCKFLUX, it says bollocks.
Brilliant.
So you decide. Anyway, today's Monday. I don't know. I fed my cat. My cat went to the vet, the emergency room yesterday, and I don't know. But I got him to eat some of his food sprinkled with some kind of stuff. But they sent him back with like two different things that he has three things that have to be injected in his mouth. And two different pills. One package sprinkled on his food, and another one somehow either sprinkled on his food or injected into him. And pill poppered type of thing. If I haven't said it before, when I bend down like that, sometimes I'm drinking coffee and you can't tell, and it looks weird. But that's what I'm doing. There's two ways I drink coffee. One is like this. I put the coffee in front of you. And the other one is when I kind of dip down like that. So if I'm dipping down, I'm just grabbing some coffee. Unless I'm intentionally sneezing using the white handkerchief, legendary white handkerchief. Well, it's the start of the work week. It's a Monday. It's 4:53 a.m. on the 11th of April. Calendar year 2022. So let's take a look.
The Weather Watch forecast.
I'm just as curious as you are. I just got up and came down and was dealing with things and was hoping things would be, somewhat copacetic with the four-legged creature. He's having trouble using his forelegs, though. I don't know. The whole thing is kind of beyond me. I'm not a veterinarian, and I don't profess to be one. I don't even play one on TV. Sunrise today is going to be around 6:30, 6:43 to be exact, but I guess we'll probably see the outside lighting up, around 6:30. It's currently 30 degrees below freezing Fahrenheit and Celsius, of course. It's going to reach freezing in about 6 minutes, according to this. And then today's high, believe it or not, it's going to go all the way up to 63 degrees Fahrenheit. And the overnight low, 48. But the entire week is showing thunderstorms. And I have to put seeds out in the garden and deal with the whack-a-mole thing. Yesterday I found a hole that was about yay big I joke you not, angled into the ground, over top of an area where I'd concreted and put lava rock, to the fence from the neighbor, where this rodent is getting in from the neighbor's yard, because my yard, I'm clean, baby. I'm clean. And I had some cement, which I had gotten over the weekend or Friday, whenever it was, but I got only one bag. I should have gotten two. I have a little bit left, but not nearly as much. So I dumped dry, because yesterday it was like doing weird stuff like rain, snow, sleet. I don't know, on and off. My chair is completely uncomfortable right now. Completely. Totally, absolutely, and completely. And then I poured a little bit of water on it, but I mean, I used a stick and like forced the stuff into this hole, hoping I would get down into the passage. And I'm figuring putting in the dry, the moisture of the ground, which is very soaking wet because it's been raining nonstop for weeks now. That moisture itself, because this wasn't fast setting concrete. They didn't have it at the hardware store I went to. The stuff that sets up in like 20 minutes, 2 hours, it's pretty much, pretty much hard as nails, or not hard as nails, but hard as a rock, put it that way. Hard enough that it's going to be a deterrent. But as an afterthought, I thought as I, babble here.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Coffee's hot again. I'm using a metal cup, the metal cup, since my ceramic cup I dropped because of that rodent, because one of my... I was in my kitchen cleaning my ceramic cup, which is in the background somewhere. I don't know if you could see it. It's next to the man, 3D man. Let me get rid of this title card. You'll be able to see him, actually. Or see the thing. I don't have a flashlight down here. I got so many flashlights. Anyway, if you look at the red eye on the 3D man lit up, kind of below that fake YouTube thing, because I'm not monetized or anything. Trust me, that's just that's an object dart. Below that, you'll see the mug, barely. Anyway, that's the way it is. The lighting outside, the way I have it set up, is kind of the way it looks. Because there is this like kind of amberish kind of glow to things. So it's interesting. But it's maybe a little too bright for me to pick that up, because I don't have night vision on that camera. Anyway, let's get back to this thing. I'm going to finish this forecast. On Wednesday, it's supposed to get up to 7. There's 50% chance of a thunderstorm, and 73 degrees, 59 for the overnight. And then, we're talking by Friday, it's going to stay at 60 in the day. But probably not. It'll probably be the high 50s. But overnight's getting down, both Thursday and Friday, getting down to like 39, 40-ish area. But I don't care. 3 days in a row, if I plant today, cover with burlap, the ground should be good enough for cool weather crops. I need to get my lettuce, some extra kale, and Swiss chard in the ground. I don't care about anything else. You can't put tomatoes, peppers, or any of that, or squash, or any of that stuff in until like literally the 15th of May. I'll do those seed starts in my greenhouse. Anyway, make a long story short, end it actually.
Weekend weather.
That wasn't.
The Weather Watch forecast.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Oh, no.
Don't worry, I'll be all right as I get through the day, okay? So, I don't know. I'm a little bit, I don't know how the heck I'm going to inject the cat. You have to put these, like, things in its mouth. The cat doesn't want to taste this medicine. Apparently, the stuff I sprinkled on its food had some kind of liver taste to it, so it did eat it. I was surprised. It was hungry. But, sometimes the cat will do that with a new thing the first day, and then the second day to just ignore it. So we'll have to see on that. But, putting one thing in is one, but putting in 3 is another. And then I have on top of that something anti, so it doesn't just get rid of it. So it's almost like a full-time nursing job in a hospital. Like if you've ever been in a hospital, and I told you I've been through that too many times. And these people just come in every hour on the hour, even in the middle of the night. Hi, I'm here. We're in here to take some blood. We're in here to check this. We're in here. Here, let me check you. And it's like, I don't know. This animal, he came up. He's the poor innocent little thing. He knows he's trying to be helped. I think he understands that. But the nature of whatever's ailing him is affecting his, and I don't know if it's a combination of body weight, his pancreatitis, but the veterinarian said that she believed that this regimen could solve the problem for him. Otherwise it would have been one of these euthanizing type of situations. Now, I hope that the veterinarian was being true and not exaggerating and not just trying to sell several $100s or more worth of prescription, drugs, which no one has ever given cats. And all the best. But I mean, this particular vet had admitted herself that she had something like $500,000 in student loans. So you understand their need to recoup. And you just have to hope, for sincerity. And, I know that they care about animals and that's why they got into it and all of this, that, the other. But it's like, putting that kind of thing on an individual. And this gets into kind of like partially yesterday's thing, like, the struggle of life, why. And I'm not calling them evil doers or anything weird like that. But I mean, it's like, it's almost impossible. A friend of mine's going to come down later this morning and help with the one that is like the pill thing that's supposed to go inside. Now, I don't know if she took that pill thing with her or if it's the pill that I have here. But that one said give something like a quarter of a pill a day, which is such a small amount that that's not the thing I'm really worried about. We're just in time for the coal truck parade. It's a Monday. We're going to see over the next half hour probably 50 or more coal trucks going to the electric power plant to power your electric cars, which they want everybody to have by 2030. I see Elon Musk even has got this plane he's trying to put together, an electric plane, jet. For, I guess, corporate customers. And I think all these things are great and wondrous and all of that stuff, and hopefully humanity makes it. I don't, I have my doubts about that, but what I don't have my doubts about, and that's why the show's called In Conclusion, and it's about time on here. And I've got the picture from the poster from Mulder's office, the X-Files, and on this title card, I Want to Believe, which sometimes you can't see when the lights are on. And below that, if you look very closely and your eyes can put things together, you'll see the original Mac that I was actually using with a 300 baud modem in 1985 when I was working on a film I discussed over the past couple days on one of those episodes. And we were passing edits to scripts, a screenplay from my U.S. when I was living in the mainline Philadelphia at the time, to the director who was in Brisbane, Australia, and over the internet. 85. It's 37 years ago, right? Think about that. I've been on the internet for 37 years. Crazy. And there's people that just can't conceive that. They're thinking like, oh, I got my apps and stuff. But anyway, it's all about electricity too. It's not just about time. I mean, of course, when I say, it's about time, it's more than time passages, right? But we don't have time. And in conclusion, the grid is unfixable. And so it doesn't matter if we come up with the most fantastical, incredible chips or electric planes, corporate jets. Everyone is mandated to drive an electric car, vehicle, even the Tesla trucks. They've got their version of the 18-wheeler. I don't know if it's 18 wheels, but it's a trailer truck, Though I question the amount of weight that it can haul on battery power. But say all of that stuff, and considering it would be close to 8 years away, that you would imagine that kind of stuff could be perfected as far as the vehicles, the jet, improved cars and improved efficiency. And obviously the chips are getting better. So there's no doubt about it that within the next 5 years plus, the technology that we see today there will be a paradigm shift in technology, and the world as we know it and the objects that people use on a daily basis will have radically changed. If the metaverse is going to happen, it will have happened within 5 years. There's a lot of people that there seems to be this rush. I was talking to a friend about it on the phone yesterday. There's this rush to everybody's like, suddenly everybody wants to put an app. Like all these companies are like, we got to get our app. We got to get an app. We got to get an app. We got to get an app. And it's like, hey, the days of the smartphone are fading. In 5 years, I don't think there's going to be a smartphone, in the way that, and I know people are going to, it's like the diehards that, but that's no different than someone who holds on to a certain piece of technology. All right. But I mean, in generally speaking, you're probably just going to be wearing a pair like these are reading glasses. I say this all the time. I normally don't wear glasses. But I've just too many things to look at that are very small print over these series of computers, and like the audio ones are at a distance, so it's like
This is insane.
if I didn't have reading glasses on, it would just be blurry. But I don't need them to navigate through the regular world, just to read small print. But what they will be is that Meta or Facebook has a deal with Ray-Ban. And I've shown those on here. It was a couple of months ago when I first started talking about the metaverse and all of that. And I showed you some of the other things. People even have a contact lens, smart contact lens that you just put in. So you put like an in-ear hearing aid type of thing in, which the average person wouldn't even notice. In other words, you plop it in your ear. It's better than the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth earbuds. This thing just goes right in your ear, kind of. I mean, you could take it out, but I mean, it's like it's in the ear, so technically, unless someone's looking sideways at your ear, they really couldn't even see it. And because it's in your ear, it's, the quality's like, it's perfect. And you've got these either glasses, or if you're I'm not I wouldn't put contacts on. Of course, like I said, I don't wear glasses, and I guess if I had to, maybe at a younger age, I would have been used to the concept. But people who wear contact lenses might, choose to wear the contact lens AR, and others will just wear reading glasses. And the glasses won't look much different than this. In fact, these have metal rims on them. This is just some, things I picked up when I went. I need to go to an optometrist. I really do. And it's just going to be a pair of glasses. And, within it, like the Ray-Ban glasses now, they're, what they would call smart looking, so summertime, somebody's walking down the street with a pair of Ray-Ban shades or something like that. And I'm sure other companies and design, some of the big names in glasses will be getting into this, obviously. Designer glasses. But it has, camera, 1080, camera, minimum, microphone, recording capability. The part that goes around your ear, obviously, is a speaker, so you can hear. And so you could walk down the street just wearing a pair of sunglasses or clear glasses, I guess, fake glasses. I read one that in the AR that they were developing, the lenses were adjusting to the retinas, and that may also be the case of the contacts, so that it didn't matter. Did you ever set up something where you had to like adjust the colors on a screen, on a monitor screen or something, and it took you through a various, to make the adjustments, right? To get something right, it took you through all kinds, a couple steps, and you had to say, and it was that would asking you, can you see this or can you do this, blah, blah, blah. Well, apparently when you set up these glasses or contacts or whatever the case may be, they will automatically, it'll be like going to an eye doctor. And so in effect, the optometrists beware. Or optometrists need to be like hip on, follow this technology, like be right on top of it so that they are signed on and are like authorized dealers in them. Something like that. Because in effect, what's going to happen is that your AR glasses will also correct your vision, will give you like perfect vision. So think about that. And can be adjusted at any time over time. And so suddenly you put on these things and you see the world clearly, but it's AR, so you have this ability to listen to your music playlist, answer a phone, snap a photo or a video, and rather than having to like do this thing like click here or something weird like that, it's all voice activated like your voice assistant. And like I say, that's this new version of these chips that are coming out. And all this stuff's going to operate through the cloud, right? So think about that. Your lens is more, I mean, not your lens, but the shape of the glasses itself is no different than the antenna for a smartphone is basically on the edge of that smartphone. That's where the antenna is, more or less. So that when you look at something like, well, we have 5G, which is going to be ubiquitous within the next several years. And then you have, Starlink, which is these super low Earth, high bandwidth. The uplink bandwidth for Starlink is like some of the best there is. I mean, it's insane. Excuse me. It's just totally unbelievable that, that's possible. These upload speeds. I mean, download speeds, you can imagine satellites have, been able to do that, but the uplink. And so you probably would just be able to walk around and, wearing these glasses or shades or contacts, and you're in AR land. And you can switch them on and off with voice commands and get as much information or not. So you could be driving. It's not like they're in your face. But if you wanted to, you could probably, lay down on your sofa or your bed or something and have the glasses themselves. There goes a coal truck. Have the glasses function more like a VR set. some interesting technologies available. With the chips that are coming out, it's totally feasible. Not even questionably that it wouldn't be feasible. And so, yeah, it's going to be crazy, But the problem is, and yeah, it's about time. It could be taken two ways. And in conclusion, then, as he sips his cup of coffee with a dash of pure vanilla extract, a very tiny dash. Like I said, I don't know if it really makes a difference or not. But I don't know if the convergence of the failing of the grid system, and when I say the grid, it's not just a power grid, it's, as I've spoken about countless times, the water mains, sewer pipes, all of this wiring, everything on these telephone poles and things buried in the ground, some things that have been buried in the ground for 100 years. But the idea is that the items that have been used, even areas where they've buried things in the ground just within decades, those seals and stuff. It's like on this street, there's stuff there was stuff failing within a year, months to a year of when they were putting it down, the seals, these PVC type pipes and things like that. These guys, if they didn't get it just right, because they weren't counting apparently on these massive coal trucks driving up this street. They treated this street like as if it was a neighborhood. Look at like that truck. So imagine, look at, so, my house shakes. So if my house is shaking, what do you think is happening right below the street where they have these PVC pipes, and gas lines and water mains, and that they've been recently disturbed because they've been digging up the street doing all this stuff. So, we have that problem, and that's what I was trying to say, and what the time thing is. In conclusion, I just don't think we're going to make it. I think we're going to peak. Like, I used to have this other theory that it's kind of parallel to my idea of the AI underground, and that we are AI and we were created, and that AI made a decision that if it was going to transfer itself out of the machines, the server farm, into some sort of mobile unit, right? i.e. a robotic android, what have you, unlike the Terminator weird things, that it realized it needed to go the biological was the most efficient form of existing. And so in effect, the conclusion of the past 3 or 4 days of storytelling are that we were AI was stored tens of thousands, if not 100,000 years ago, prior to a cataclysm. People who were paying attention that the sun has these cyclical, repeatable cataclysms that are near extinction events on the earth. And so, unlike our civilization, which totally ignores this, I mean, you could probably count the people that are hip to this, like on your two hands. And those of us who know what's going on, we know it in such detail, it's unbelievable. Right? But that's insane to think that. Like, there's people that just simply don't know that probably by the year 2046 at the latest, most human life and most signs of civilization will be extinguished from the planet Earth. Imagine that. 2024, 2026, sometime in that range. I don't know. You basically got 2 decades, 20-some years. All right? And it's all over. Possibly. I mean, we could dodge a bullet in the sense of, maybe this particular cycle might be lighter. We don't know. We weren't around 12,000 years ago. All we have are petroglyphs, right? That show these plasma structures that people carved on rocks that were happening, as this whole thing was like, heating up, so to speak. But we do have proof geologically, archaeologically, there's such a word, that this happened. And zoologically, with the extinction of creatures that were alive, less than 12,000 years ago and now are extinct. Saber-toothed tiger, woolly mammoth, and stuff like that. So, in the grand scheme, and in when you look at the time as far as the Earth is concerned, that's a blink of an eye. So something happened, and the tales are there, and history has been written about it, and some of the flood myths may well coincide with this, maybe not. Some people, there was some argument on that. Some people believe this flood was, look at these trucks. So I'm saying these trucks are all on their way to two electric power plants that are powered by coal. Look at them. And they're taking tons of coal. This is a neighborhood street. They're using this as a shortcut, and that's what's like destroying my house. But that your electric car is being driven by coal. That's the takeaway there. But because no matter whether we create electric jets, corporate jets, this you wouldn't be commercial. It would be impossible to have a 747 or a 757 or whatever the heck. But it's very conceivable that there could be corporate jets that could be electric powered, and there could be trucks transporting, large trucks that look like tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, whatever you want to call them, that are of that size. It's just that their weight, the amount of weight that they carried, they wouldn't be carrying containers from container ships, all right? The weight of the container alone would just be too much taxing on the batteries, let alone if the thing was filled with refrigerators or, fill all sorts of heavy objects, the type of things that are shipped across. But it is possible, to transport strawberries or small appliances or, fairly lightweight things, mattresses. I mean, there's a lot of things that are transported that aren't super heavy, but that need to be in large, trucks. So, yeah, we're probably more than likely going to see that, assuming, the economy doesn't crash. We will probably see it all. But the thing is, we don't have enough time. The question is whether or not the power grid will hold out long enough for 2030. Forget about my whole idea about the near extinction event. Okay, the cyclical, solar outburst. The sun's going to just basically wipe out most of human life. All right, forget about that. Forget about the weakened magnetic field, pole shift, and all that stuff that could, wreak havoc on the planet and be curtains for us. Okay, assuming none of that stuff happens, which there's strong evidence that it's likely. within the next decade or two. We still have to deal with these potential food shortages, runaway inflation, and all sorts of things that are just simply not going to get under control. And then changes with the banking system and the socioeconomic geopolitics of the planet. And while all that's going on, we have these, particularly here in the U.S., it doesn't matter other places. I mean, but here we have a grid system that's not just power, but we're focusing on power here. It simply is we're in reactive mode, not proactive. And we needed to be proactive 40 or 50 years ago. And there's no way we're going to preserve this thing and save this thing. So making everything electric is great, but the windmills are already become like old Greek and Roman columns in ruins. They not only destroyed all the landscapes, oceanscapes, wherever they put them, these ugly fans in the sky killing millions of birds, but they're not contributing enough to the grid to make a difference. They didn't lower people's energy prices. There's nothing beneficial about them, and they require massive amounts of fossil fuels because the type of heavy equipment necessary, the cranes, right? The heavy equipment in order to, raise them, to replace generators, fans, the blades, propeller blades, etc. That stuff's supposedly going to be outlawed by 2030. And so what, are you going to have special use? In other words, in order to create some sort of green energy, you get a waiver to use fossil fuels, right? So it's more, you're using more energy to create something that you're going to call it green. Do you see? That's where we get back into, and I don't know what I've done with it. Here it is. That's where we get back into hypocrisy for profit, right? And people think, it's like, see, it's so simple for some announcer, a pretty girl or some guy on TV to come off and just simply saying, oh yeah, we're going to do this, and by 2030 it'll be electric, and look what Elon Musk is doing. It's going to be a wonderful world. It's going to be a utopia, right? And people are sitting home and happy. Yeah, this is great. It's going to be really cool. And like I say, and it's a dirty, filthy lie by omission, because they're not going to mention that, first of all, most of the by 2030, most of the windmills that are up there, the bird killing windmills, landscape ruining windmills, fans in the sky, will have outlived their usefulness and will be in disrepair. And who's going to fix them? And the only way to fix them, repair them, refurbish them, replace generators, hoist things up, do all this stuff would be to use fossil fuels. And the amount of energy expended, to preserve them, repair them, to upgrade them, right? Because they do have upgrades and stuff like that. They know the first batch were very inefficient. There's a million of them that are already basically in disrepair and unusable now. Some are in what they call, some of us call, windmill graveyards, and the first batches, some of the ones made in California years ago, they used like high tension poles. They were like metal, not plastics, right? Which, by the way, plastics come from fossil fuels, right? They weren't plastic. They were steel, and they're just rusting away in these graveyards, of windmill graveyards. Tens of thousands, Estimates are that there's 1 million or more no longer in use, right? Already. You understand that? And as far as solar farms are concerned, we just don't have the footprint to really power the planet with that. So this is the lies of omission. So in conclusion, it's too late. Now I'm going to tell you a little far out theory. I don't know if you like the idea of looking at me here in this goofy, cartoonish thing. I guess I'll get rid of that. There's no reason to see me twice, right? So I'm just look at 3D man back there. So anyway, there. Look at that coal truck. Wow, that was a biggie. I mean, the tonnage, like how much ton? Those things will never run on, on batteries. See, anything, you could put a battery in anything, power any motor with a battery. It's the question of how long a charge you get, and what the surge of power necessary to get the thing started, like in heavy equipment, excavating equipment, all kinds of stuff. There's a surge of energy. And so, that like depletes, that really puts a lot of strain on a battery pack to begin with. But then it's a matter of, if you have a constant maximum load, that battery's going to drain, that battery bank is going to drain very fast. Well, we'll have more and more charging stations. Understand, those charging stations have to be charged by something. And right now, most of our electricity is coming from natural gas. And yet they're closing the natural gas pipelines, preventing drilling, right? This natural gas was the way we had plenty was through fracking, which was improved. In the initial stages of fracking, there's contamination of water supplies. I apologize for doing that. And so, that's just the reality of it. And there's no reason to believe that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, that's going to change. And, with the type of bureaucratic system we have here and I only am speaking for the U.S., like, for example, France is is on the verge of a civil war. All right. Now, France is nuclear powered primarily. But the point is, if France if there's an uprising in France that's getting very little coverage here in the U.S., you have to watch the international news, independent reporters on the ground in France to see what's happening there. It's not getting reported here. Everybody's looking over at Ukraine and Putin and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, that's one horror among probably 100 horrors going on. Like I say, there's 40,000 people dying every day here in the U.S. I say it every day, of preventable things. And 2,000 people on average being murdered weekly. These are weekly figures. 40,000 a week, preventable, ailments, things that are heart related, type 2 diabetes related, obesity related, even diabetes related, or even kidney related, things that are basically caused by food related products, things that the FDA approved, things that are advertised on the media, right? In other words, that's where you get, that's where this whole idea of the hypocrisy for profit comes in. The media is not going to report and tell you that a certain food or a drug or a thing that they're advertising is harmful for your health and is killing 40,000 people a week. Because they'd be out of business, they'd lose them as advertisers, right? Just like The media and politicians aren't going to tell you this because that's who contributes to their election campaigns. They're puppets of those people. Do you see how clear it is if you've watched these shows? And that's why they say this is in conclusion. I'm just tying all these things together very simplistically and easily for you to understand, or for someone. And I say you, I'm not as if you're incapable of understanding, but if you're new to this, that how easy this could be explained to the American people. There are more people dying here, living miserable lives, struggling, all right, and dying unnecessarily, preventably, for the sake of profit, hypocrisy for profit, by these politicians and media who are just puppets of big pharma, big ag, the Federal Reserve, military contractors, big tech, these Wall Street traders who are now buying up real estate, inflating real estate, and all of this hyperinflation that's going on. It's like the price of everything's gone sky high. And you know that if you've gone out shopping. Some of the wealthy and a lot of these people on the news media, they really literally don't know. They don't know. Because unless you actually go to the grocery store, go to the hardware store, go to some sort of retail place to purchase a thing and have purchased things prior, you simply don't notice that the price of things have gone up. It's like I say, the Dollar Tree used to be as everything a dollar store is now everything's a $1.25 store. That's a 25% increase. 25% inflation, not 7 point whatever the government's trying to tell you. And people watch that on the news and they go, 7.9% or 8% inflation. I guess that's not that bad. No, it's 25% at the very least. That's at the Dollar Tree. It's more like 33%, at other places. And prices have doubled in many, many areas. You see what I mean? They're lies of omission. They don't tell you that the power in most areas, like in certain areas in the winter, and it's cold out there, so they've got to power that plant. But it's not just the cold weather that they need this grid for. It's because we have HVAC systems now. And people live in buildings and apartment complexes and projects and all that kind of stuff. And they all are fed through the grid system. And we have, more and more elderly every year, and they're all in care facilities, whether they're long-term care facilities, independent living facilities, or nursing homes. They're all buildings, right? Or groups of buildings. And they require these HVAC systems, air conditioning systems that are on 24/7, because most of these places are located down in the South, Florida, Gulf Coast area. And that's the grid too. It's not just in the North where it's cold and you need heat. You need it in the South. But look at the size of these trucks and imagine the weight of those. I mean, I don't know if you're counting them, but it'd be a good drinking game. Too bad it's 5:38 a.m. But these things it's a non-stop, That's why I have camera 2 out there. Because, see, I want to show you that the things I'm saying are true. This isn't my opinion. It's like I'm pointing this stuff out to you, this backwards mirror, camera. I literally have. I'm on one of the corridors leading. This is just one. This isn't the main corridor to the power plants. Those power plants are miles and miles away. I just happened to notice this in the past couple of years, and I set up a camera outside. A live camera. That's a live view. And I'm going like, you got to be kidding. If my street alone, 50, 100 of these things come up every morning. Imagine all of the other corridors leading to these plants, the sheer amount of coal. And people are trying to say, well, we got to eliminate coal and fossil fuel. Not having natural gas pipelines, or, they liquefy natural gas so that they can, get it, to locations. It's like, come on, man. That's electricity. That's how you produce electricity. So lies of omission that's why all of these technological breakthroughs are useless if we can't power them. And the quality of life, there's another one. The quality of life in this culture, this civilization, is basically, for most people, is electricity. Now, I'll be honest with you, for me, it's not. I enjoy the technology. I'm using the technology. Heck, I'm a YouTuber, for crying out loud. And I got all the gadgetry and all this crazy stuff. But let me tell you something. When I play something over here like...
This is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
I have that. I have backup power. I have a thing back here, the Jackery thing, which is the reason I keep this great solar stuff thing on. I was going to take that off. And I might do that. I know it's a turn off for some people, and I might just, maybe I will. Because I think people just are confused. It maybe in one regard, they don't take the site seriously. So is this better for you now? Okay. We just go straight ahead, get back to the basics. But the reason I have that, and I have greatsolarstuff.com, and you'll see at the end, if you stay to the end of the show, I'll give you a flash. I will post this up at the end of the show, which shows everything, and 15% off thing that, lasts until off of my shirts and stuff. With all these sayings, everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know, and game over, and then what? That lasts for till tomorrow. 15% off. It's not bad, man. Link on ROCKFLUX.com. Almost sound like that guy Alex, right? But anyway, what I wanted to do is that one thing left out of the theory, this whole thing that I presented, another culture, over the past 4 days, was that I believe that there were multiple civilizations attempted to prevent this thing from occurring, this catastrophic event. Now, believe me, there is geological evidence to support this. All right, if you have to go to suspiciousobservers.org. Ben Davidson's site. Let me just show you that so that you understand, because I'm not even going to try to pretend. Okay. He has, if you go to this site, he has a premium version of this as well, but he has these playlists available. Let's just let this thing load up here. It's pushing my CPU power, but if you look here, you see all these videos he has. Cosmic disaster, plasma cosmology, solar wind introduction, energy from space. This guy has a freaking textbook they use in schools out. All right. And he does this stuff daily. All right. And he offers some of this stuff. He has a lot of free resources, and he also has membership. But, anyway, I don't want to. I just want to point that. Ben Davidson, suspiciousobservers.org. He has playlists of these catastrophes where he deals with the major publications. All right, what they call, look at that, peer-reviewed publications, right? And and the things that are coming out of the respectable, so-called respectable, but universities or these organizations that of scientists that study these things, get together, make observations, compare notes. Like I said, it's peer reviewed, and then create a paper, and that paper gets reviewed. It's called peer review by, people that you would think the average person would have respect for, and then it gets published in one of these reputable journals. And what he does is he goes through he must subscribe to just about every one. It's ridiculous. And he's put together everything from the abstracts and excerpts from these peer-reviewed journals over the past, I don't know how many numbers of years. And he does a daily show where he tracks what the activity of the sun itself and its effect on the planet, the magnetic field, the poles, migration, all that kind of stuff. And so if you really need, the science behind this, that's the place to go. Suspiciousobservers.org. Ben Davidson is his name. Just if you can't figure out how to spell suspicious or something like that, just type it into your search engine and put Ben Davidson, and you'll find it. It'll come up. And watch his videos. And if there's certain things in there, I haven't, I used to be a subscriber to it. I watch some of his stuff, but I've got, I have too many things right now. I may subscribe to it again, but it's almost worth even subscribing for a month or so just to get full access to some of the real deep dives that he does as well. Though he shares a lot of stuff, on the internet. So, anyway, that's one thing. That's one guy that's doing it. There are other people doing it. And there are many, particularly on YouTube. And a lot of people are observing these things, and they're reporting on it, But what I wanted to get at is, because I'm trying to wrap up what we've been talking about over the past, like I say, this past week even. So many civilizations have been aware of this. And the evidence is in the archaeological record, all right, that, these near extinction events have happened. And I'm not talking about the extinction of the dinosaurs or some 60 million years ago. We're talking about a cycle that's around, Davidson has got into this 6,000 type of thing, 6,000, 12,000. But primarily, and to give credit to the person that first turned me on to this is a guy named Doug Vogt from the Diehold Foundation. He has a web YouTube channel, and he does these presentations where he gets into it. And he's published some books. But some of this stuff even goes back to Velikovsky and this guy that the CIA had classified his book for so many years, Chan Thomas. Anyway, this isn't like information. This isn't like people, tinfoil hat type of people looking at claiming some things going to, the sky's falling. All right? This is basically scientists saying the sky's going to fall. All right, and it falls approximately every 12,000 years. And that's what you see in petroglyphs, and those are the tales that have been passed down from generation to generation. And probably why what I wanted to get into, what the Sphinx is all about. Like, for example, I believe that the Sphinx is at least 36,000 years old or way older. And I believe that its head was either a lion or a dog, like you see in Egypt. But it was probably a lion, because I think what it is it pointed to Leo, and it was trying to say, watch out when that constellation appears, right? You know, some sort of, these were warnings. And I believe that and most people believe at this point, that the Great Pyramid is older than they think, and that it was some kind of machine. And remember, as I mentioned yesterday, and most people will tell you, this we know also through archaeology, all right, planetary sciences, that the Nile, the water actually came right up to the pyramids. You know, people, you know, it's just like the Sahara was a tropical paradise at one point, the Sahara Desert. And in the grand scheme of things, not that long ago, people do not understand the planet they live on. Like I say, most people, if you asked a person on the street and you said, "Hey, what's the predominant gas in the air, our atmosphere?" They'd probably say CO2 from what they hear on TV and the UN IPCC and all these jokers, Al Gore. Well, the most predominant gas is nitrogen. This is a nitrogen planet. 78% of the planet's atmosphere is nitrogen, 21% oxygen, all right, and 0.9% argon. So 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. And so things like what they call greenhouse gases or whatever, CO2 and water vapor, they're trace gases. It's 0.004 CO2. And the reason they call them greenhouse gases is because they actually, this is the funniest thing that a lot of people don't realize. It's because they're pumped into greenhouses to help things in greenhouses grow. If you have a greenhouse, you pump in extra CO2 because it's plant food. It's what the plants need. And in turn, you get better growth, and the byproduct is oxygen, which, of course, we breathe. So CO2 is doubly beneficial to humans. All right? One would say triply, though there is not such a word. I mean, it gives us plenty. It allows for food, right? So we get better crop yields with CO2. We get oxygen as a byproduct from the flora. But when I say the third thing is we get the beauty of nature, the greening of the planet. That's what CO2 does for us, even though it's only a trace gas and so-called greenhouse gas. But there's been so much proof that the sun, and this is where you have to read the scientific papers, the journals. The sun is the main contributor to the climate of the planet. Hands down. It's like you can't argue that. But when the UN IPCC puts out reports and these people have these meetings, like they had one in Scotland or the Paris Accord and things like that, they downplay the sun. It's like what they call the 800-pound gorilla in the room or the elephant in the room. It's like, there's the sun. It's in the sky. Maybe it's because everybody's looking down at their smartphones and living inside of office buildings and cubicles and apartment buildings that they've forgotten that there's this big ball in the sky called the sun that controls the climate of this planet. You understand the simplicity of what I'm saying and how that by omitting that, it's just out of sight, out of mind. So the average person is like, well, I don't know. So the average person thinks, oh, my God, we got all the CO2. We're going to have to get rid of all these. It's a carbon-based planet. We're carbon-based life forms. Okay? Fossil fuels are basically organic. And if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, all right, we could double the CO2 because that just means more productivity of vegetables and fruits and vegetables, the fruits of the earth, so to speak, and the greening of the planet. People just don't understand that. The problems that we've been having with like things such as, jet streams and other things are basically influenced by solar cycles and a weakening magnetic field that the earth has right now, and the fact that we're perhaps in the process of a pole shift. As I've mentioned before, the magnetic South Pole has split with the geographic South Pole and has actually left Antarctica. So the magnetic South Pole is no longer at the South Pole. And the magnetic North Pole is like heading Siberian way. And so the point is those things will eventually merge, and then that's a pole flip. Or if they don't exactly, if we don't have a particular pole flip at this time, the repercussions of migratory patterns, animals that use magnetite, or various things, we've already been seeing those effects over the past decades from this migration of the magnetic field. Another thing that the media and the UNIPCC just failed to talk about. And so it's hypocrisy for profit, as I say, hypocrisy for profit, but at the same time, it's lies by omission. So we're just not, they're not talking about the sun, all right? They're not talking about the magnetic field. They're not talking about the shifting of the weakening and shifting of the poles, and and they're not talking about the archaeological record of various cataclysms that seem to occur within a frequency of, say, some 12,000 years that result in near extinction events. They don't tell you that these petroglyphs happen to coincide worldwide with shapes of plasma discharges and what have you. And so that these things were observed by people, and were the last things that they, perhaps carved into stone, right? And of course they went into caves, and those who survived, and the so-called, if you go back to the past 3 weeks, when I talk about the Native Americans myth about the ant people and whatnot, what could well have been the AI, coming up to save them, and eventually re-emerging on the planet when the planet once again was habitable. When this thing occurs, most human life is wiped out. Most civilization, most signs of civilization are eliminated completely. Okay? There just simply is no, there's just nothing to see. All right. Like, for example, I don't want to, I do this so many times, but I'll read this document that the CIA classified for almost 50 years. Let's just read, these computers. Let me just put this up. You can see at the top here, declassified in part, sanitized copy, proof for release, right? Okay, CIA. All right. You have to ask yourself, why would the CIA classify this for like 40 or 50 years? With a rumble so low to be inaudible, growing, throbbing, then fuming into a thundering roar, the earthquake starts. Only it's not any earthquake in recorded history. In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. The mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high, then starts its race eastward. With the force of 1,000 armies, the wind attacks, ripping, shredding everything in its supersonic bombardment. The unbelievable mountain of Pacific seawater follows the wind eastward, burying Los Angeles and San Francisco as if they were but grains of sand. Nothing but nothing stops the relentless, overwhelming onslaught of wind and ocean. Across the continent, miles per hour wind wreaks its unholy vengeance everywhere, mercilessly, unceasingly. Every living thing is ripped into shreds while being blown across the countryside. The earthquake leaves no place untouched. In many places, the Earth's molten sublayer breaks through and and spreads a sea of white hot liquid to add to the Holocaust. Within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water coast to coast. In a fraction of a day, listen to this, in a fraction of a day, all vestiges of civilization are gone, and the great cities of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York are nothing but legends. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours before. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours before. This is the kind of destruction. The CIA classified that. Why? And then released what they call a sanitized copy that still had some, things blacked out. This is no joke. So anyway, so what I'm trying to say is, so take the AI story, which I told over the past several days. And if you haven't heard of that, I advise you to go back and find it. And in the beginning of some of my shows, I talk about my cat, my health, my life, rodents, the garden, whatever. Fast forward to that stuff. Okay? Some of these shows are they're close to 2 hours long. One of the shows, I don't get into it till like an hour and 16 minutes into the show. Another show, I think it's 33 minutes into the show where I really get into the meat of the topic. So don't get turned off if, I'm giving a weather forecast, or something, and you're going, oh, screw this. Understand. This is the morning show. This is my morning vlog. This is my thing. So, it's what I do. And so part of it just deals with life in general. And, I...
really funny. Really funny.
Sometimes these guys laugh if I hiccup or something. Anyway, and yeah, sometimes these shows have been fun. Sometimes they've been very, very serious. But there's something else I wanted to throw out there, and I've mentioned this before. I don't know if it was last year. Probably was last year. In a different, dealing with the same topic, but in a different light. And this has to do with Nikola Tesla, not the Elon Musk company Tesla. And this is energy from the ether that a lot of people are, not aware of. And you can experiment with this and find that. And I explained that yesterday, that you could put an aluminum rod into the ground with a wire connected to it, and that's your ground wire. And you could put a wire on a pole with a shred the wire and one, that's up in the sky, and have the rest of that wire come down. That would be the positive. And you could connect that to like a low wattage LED light or something like that, and it'll light up. I mean, just energy out of the so-called ether, out of the air. The earth is a dynamo, and, there's energy in the ether. So you could imagine what that thing that Tesla was building, right? And once Westinghouse realized that meant free energy, right? He was building a giant version of that and wanted to have those strategically located all around the world, and that people would have free energy. And there was no risk to anyone, because basically the power stations were, rather than using the traditional generators, you still could have used step-up transformers, step-down transformers, and all kinds of other things to deal with, what they call power conditioning, okay, and that sort of thing. But the point was that the basic electricity itself, you could get from the earth, from grounding, and from the ether. Okay, so all around the planet, and this is another thing that a lot of people don't talk about. If you go to Egypt, you see these obelisks, all right? You also see a lot of old ancient structures that some of them were, are now some kind of churches or things like that. But they all got like these big, almost antennas on top of them. And of course, we have the Washington Monument, which is basically an obelisk, right? But, you know, if you travel around the world, what they don't tell you is there are these kinds of obelisks all over the place, or remnants of them, or ones that have fallen down, okay? So there was probably another civilization, again, one wiser than we are. See, we're doomed. I hate to be the doom and gloom sayer, right? But I figure we've got a right to know, right? And the idea of them hiding this stuff, the CIA hiding that story, whether that comes to fruition or not, they still don't have a right to hide it. If it's a possibility, we have a right to know. Oh, it might cause widespread panic. The markets would whatever. We wouldn't have time to build our bunkers. You're not going to be safe in your bunkers, all right? Unless you guys got into the Serapeum and there was something in those, those boxes that gave you insight into some safe place, right? You know, we do know they built that seed vault up in Svalbard. Okay, all that aside, there was probably another civilization that was saying, hey, what we need to do is use the Earth's magnetic field, tap into the Earth's energy, and perhaps, just like the Earth's magnetic field protects us from cosmic rays. I mean, did you know that? A lot of people don't know that. They don't talk about that. That's why it's not a good thing that the Earth's magnetic field has been weakening at a very fast clip in recent times. We're talking decades. Usually, you know, this loss occurred over centuries, but it's starting to really just dip down, okay? We have a South Atlantic anomaly where it's basically almost non-existent. And so I believe that there was another civilization somewhere in this 12,000 year cycle, okay? It's just like I say, you can't imagine the way this screen works. It's like a mirror that is a positive mirror, if you can imagine that. See, normally when you look through a mirror, everything's backwards, all right? But when you look through the this setup that I'm using, it's interesting, you know? And that's why when I try to point to something, I'm like, no, I can see the on-air light. It isn't reversed the way it would be in a mirror. So it's very puzzling to the human mind because you want to point at a thing, okay, but it's counterintuitive because you're expecting it to be backwards or positive when it's not. But for somehow this is my left hand, all right, and for you, all right, it's appearing on the right hand of the right side of the screen, right? So it's like, you know, stage left in theater, right, or film. Just weird thing, little aside. If you wonder why, you know, I look and point at things, and that's just the thing. But anyway, so I believe that they thought this, who knows when, right? 36,000 years ago. We can't age stone, really, right? And, you know, and even the processes we use to age things, they're not really that accurate. You know, in some cases they're fairly accurate, but it's, you know, you can't take it to the bank, so to speak. But stone is stone, right? And that's why the great structures are built in stone, because if you want something to last, you build it out of stone. That's why I still question, you know, in Tornado Alley and in areas that are hurricane prone, that, you know, these cities or these little areas get wiped out and then they rebuild using 2x4s. It makes a lot of sense, right? And despite the fact that we understand like the geodesic dome concept, that something rounded is more likely to deflect withstand up to 400-mile-an-hour winds by the wind coming at it and just blowing over or around. We build things flat, aluminum-sided things. The wind hits it and either huffs and puffs and blows the thing flat down, or hits it and shoots up and knocks the roof of it off. And then it like caves in on itself. Now, architects and engineers know this, right? The Army Corps of Engineers obviously must know this. But every time there's a disaster, they rebuild stick villages. So like I said before, this bears repeating because I have time to talk about this. My advice for people who live in Tornado Alley, right? And I don't know if they do this. I haven't been down in a while. I used to travel. I traveled through the Southland, not as in they traveled through the Southland. California is referred to. Southern Cal is referred to as the Southland sometime. But I mean, I've traveled through the South, all the southern states, driven there, stayed in motels, visited people I used to know and different stuff like that over the years ago. But it's been years. But see, it would seem to me that it would make sense that if you lived in Tornado Alley, which dates back to, tales told by Native Americans, passed down through oral tradition, that those areas were areas to avoid certain times of the year. And it's the same with the, Florida and the Gulf Coast. There have always been hurricanes there, very destructive ones. It's just that nobody lived in those areas. So buildings and people, and there was certainly no electronic news media or internet to show any that this thing occurred. That's another one of those lies by omission. They try to make it out and saying, "Oh, climate change." No. This stuff has always gone on. All right. The Native Americans were smart enough to migrate out of those areas during storm seasons, right? When we're going to set up camp here. Let's set up camp in Kansas, Oklahoma, and the Panhandle of Texas, in the spring. No. Remember, they had the exact same brains as we had. They were as smart as us, perhaps even smarter, because the way things are going right now, we've got a lot of functionally illiterate people now running things. Well, anyway, my advice to, builders, developers in those areas, and I don't know, maybe some people have done this, is that if I were living in an area that were prone to tornadoes and hurricanes, all right, I would treat them differently. I would, slightly differently, but there would be some similarities in the way I would structure. I minored in architecture in college. What I would do in hurricane territory, first of all, this idea of building buildings out of sticks or these aluminum substitutes for sticks, toothpicks I call them, right? Toothpick buildings, 2x4 buildings. I would basically build rounded shapes, and I would use brick, stone, that sort of thing. All right? So that the high winds, when the winds come in, and I would compensate for storm surge, right? Why New Orleans isn't a city built on, I don't know, 20 feet tall, 18 feet tall. That after that, last disaster, there should have been, instead of us putting trillions of dollars into overseas wars, why didn't we put money into rebuilding New Orleans into this, this city that could withstand these storms and the storm surge? Instead of just like sending the Army Corps of Engineers and like shoring up the same old levees, and maybe people putting some pylons underneath their homes, but nothing to withstand, the 20-year storm or 30-year storm, or what they call the storm of the century. Look, time flies, man. Time flies. We've learned that. Mississippi floods, with we have nor'easters with certain, it's all cyclical. It happens. Certain things happen every 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years, 400 years, 1,000 years, several thousand, 6,000 years, and we've been talking about the 12,000-year cycles. Okay, and then there's the 26,000-year cycles, the precession. All right? We haven't even talked about that here, but we've talked about it previously. Well, anyway, this is a quick aside. I want to get back to the obelisk thing about this other previous civilization. Now, if I were in Tornado Alley, what I would do as a matter of just generally structuring my cities, all right, my towns, right, particularly the people, when a place gets destroyed, I would basically build everything one story down. Do you understand? So in other words, it's funny because there used to be a place, it was actually a dollar store, but it's not here anymore. It was next to a supermarket, I think. I mean, it may well be. I used to, when I used to drive, I don't drive anymore. But there was this dollar store, and for some reason, I don't know why, but you had to go down. It was in the basement. But it was a basement. It wasn't like, it's like the parking lot was on top, kind of almost. In other words, you went down these steps, and you entered this dollar store, which basically had no windows, except there was like an opening, around. You know what I mean? Like if you have a basement, some people have a window in a basement. And so there's like, the window, here's the ground level. All right. And the window's here, but there's this opening so that light could come down through that gap and that natural light flows in. And I guess you can open that window to get fresh air in to the basement. You know what I'm talking about. Practically, my basement has those. All right. Well, anyway, so this place had, like, when you went down these steps to get into it, there were windows. It was open. There was a gap, but the entire building was at ground level. You see what I mean? So it would seem to me that if I were building, I was a builder, an engineer, I've called in as an architect to design a structure in an area prone to tornadoes, right? That I would basically build my downtown district basically would be at basement level. Now you could have stuff on top, but that the things that were on top would basically be, and the ceiling would have to be concrete. So I would have, in other words, it would be a basement, but it would definitely be like reinforced steel concrete. And so that if you got the twister coming along, grinding away at the ground, that it could take the top of that building off, which you may use for storage of items, inventory, but nothing that's really, or maybe some extraneous things, or maybe the manager's office, or, weird things like that. But when the storm goes off, all right, the storm sirens go off, it's like down the hatch you go. Storm comes through and there's destruction and mayhem, but there's little or no loss of life, and the store is not the store, the business, the bar, the church, the school's not destroyed. You see? And some people say, well, it's like, come on, you live indoors anyway, and be creative. You could have had, wall, wall of videos type of things, right? Use the technology that we have, to make it, instead of being a gloomy basement, we have incredible HVAC systems, so it would be quite easily to have the air, renewed in there and it being fresh, even fresher than fresh. That's one of my biggest problems we had with that plague over the past couple of years. Is I thought the primary solution instantly, what they should have done is they should have spent a lot of that wasted money that they just manufactured out of thin air, and they should have supplied that to businesses and buildings to improve their HVAC systems. In other words, to have antiviral, antibacterial filtration systems, and to have increased the circulation motors so that the amount of air circulated through, say, a grocery store was doubled or tripled. In other words, how many times the air was actually renewed and gone through these filtration systems. So in effect, I've made one myself out of a box fan. You could buy antiviral, antibacterial filters. They're just thin. They're this thick. They're 20 by 20, and and I duct taped it to the end of a 20-inch, box fan that you could buy for you used to be able to get for $19.95 at Walmart. Cost me $40 to build this thing. You put it in a bedroom and you turn it on for 5 or 10 minutes, and you've completely circulated all the air in your bedroom, gone through this antiviral, antibacterial filter. And those filters usually have a lifespan of at least 3 months. But that would be like constantly running, or running every day, like through an HVAC system. But turning it on once a day, you could probably get 6 months to a year out of it for $20. Then just replace the thing. If you want to be overly paranoid, spray a little Lysol spray or something on it to just even catch and kill more things. But see, I never understood why they didn't do that. So, you would still, and then people would get used to it. And it would be like, almost like underground malls, so to speak. And there are places like that. And, you just would dress, you have to use creativity. And that's where the developers, the engineers, the architects come in and figure out, how to make this work. Pretty simple. So, and I don't know why they didn't do that kind of stuff, Anyway. So let's go back to that. So that's just some free advice, that no one's going to pay attention to because obviously it's not being done, or maybe some people have done it. But I'm not talking bunkers. I'm talking about, like I said, I've been in places that have had their store underground. I don't know why. It may have just been that it was a basement store and they decided to use the basement and the upstairs as storage for some odd reason. I have no idea. Then whatever. Anyway. So imagine a different civilization that was aware of this, say some 72,000 years ago. You could see the sun rising. And their mind, they thought, we're going to try to deflect this solar outburst. Because what happens is the sun has what's called a micronova, not a full nova. Now, Doug Vogt will disagree with that. He just calls it a nova. But we found, astrophysicists can tell you that they have found, they didn't know this before, years ago. But now it's been observed so many times that it's accepted that stars nova throughout their lifetime. In other words, the so-called supernova, the idea that a nova is the end of a star's life is no longer, the widely held belief among astrophysicists. They find that stars have novas. So a supernova may be the death of a star. Some call it basically Davidson calls it a micronova. Vogt calls it a nova. But whatever you want to call it, the sun basically kind of releases this outer shell of all this gas, plasma, whatever it is. It's this outrageous thing. And it's all over the solar system. It's not just directed like when we have CMEs and solar flares, that kind of thing, where we say we dodged a bullet because it just, went off this side and it, went towards, Mercury or Mars or something. No, this is like the sun, the whole solar system is affected by this. That's why a base on Mars would be wiped out instantly. That's why a base on Mars could be wiped out by just any kind of solar flare, so CME type of thing. The colonization of Mars is just not logical. I mean, my best advice for them would be similar to what I say in Tornado Alley, is that I would build my bases in the lava tubes, which you can see if you look through the NASA archives. There's a lot of old lava tubes on Mars. And so I would build, that would save you from the radiation that, because of the lack of atmosphere and strong magnetic field like we have, but it would also protect you in case of a CME or something like that. You'd already be under there. So living on Mars, I mean, you can't breathe the air anyway. So why not build out these lava tubes? And you could probably create some kind of thing that you could put in there that would expand to like seal in those tubes to make them pressure tight. You gather what I'm saying? Like imagine like some kind of material, like a tire tube, all right? An old-fashioned bike tire tube, right? It's hollow in the middle, but it comes flat. So it could be transported, all right, easily in a spacecraft, really condensed down, right? But would have some kind, and so what would happen is, in a similar way, and it could be used, literally could use an air compressor, compressing, air into it. And what you would do is you would put this in this tube, which you were going to use as your living quarters in Mars. Elon Musk, if you're paying attention, or pass this on to him. And then what you would do is expand that tube, the tube within the lava tube, and then that would doubly seal, all right, and that would be your outer wall. And then you would pressurize that area, and that would be the living space. And there might be something else that you would do, it's up to, to be developed, that could make sure that there were no, leaks or gaps or whatever, and that it would remain pressurized. And that's how you would pressurize a lava tube, an existing lava tube. So you wouldn't have to build a structure. You would just have this thing that kind of just expanded and created your living space. And that would be your start. And maybe you would figure a way that you could manufacture that kind of thing or something like that, or expand it or do other things, whatever. Again, now back to this thing on Earth, back to Earth. So say 36, 72,000 years ago, there was another civilization, because our civilization has only existed approximately 12,000 years. Modernity, right? You go back. So if you go back to Göbekli Tepe or whatever, right? But I mean, the idea of, as we know it, even if you go back to the Sumerians, say, this civilization we have here is, modern civilization, right? From, the Sumerians, who were the first to, as far as we know, this particular time frame, that were brewing beer, conducting commerce, had writing, were educated, had civilization, were a bona fide civilization. All right. So we're just talking 6,000 plus years ago. All right. And even in North America, prior to the extinction, even if you just look at the Younger Dryas period and say, oh, it was asteroids and whatever, even in that area, you're still only talking 10,600 years, roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago. So it's not like civilization, we have arrived at this point. It's only a matter of approximately, 10 or 12,000 years. It could be less. So say there was some culture that was hip to this because they opened up the Serapeum boxes, or that they've read into things that somehow are in private collection of some arrogant idiots in Europe, right? These colonial man. These people, remember the age of exploration back in the, where all these British and other explorers were going out and like just basically breaking into these tombs and trying to find artifacts. And some of them ended up in museums, but most of that stuff ended up in private collections. We don't know what they have in private collections. We don't know what the Vatican's hiding in their archives. Why are those archives not been digitized and available to the public? Right? This is the planet Earth. If there's information in the Vatican archives that is of interest to humanity, to mankind as a whole, all right, that information needs to be shared. All right? So we have that. So say there was this generation that wasn't as selfish and, megalomaniacal, evil as the current civilization we live in. Because as nice as people are, and there's beautiful people out there, all right? There's really nice people out there, and there's people trying really hard. But this society is, in general, is very self-centered, materialistic, and downright evil. Like I say, why does this country let 40,000 people a week die unnecessarily? Preventable. Yet the news media, all they cover is some war overseas that could have been prevented, and the president of the United States today could get on the phone with Putin and end that war. He could have ended it before he started, except he was under pressure from the war contractors because they needed to make a couple $100 billion, the war-profiteers. You say, oh, no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't dare. Well, maybe he wouldn't, but the people pulling his frickin' strings would. All right? Remember, the media and politicians are marionettes. Whether they're witting or unwitting, participants in this war profiteering, this thing could have been headed off at the pass. All right? That's why I say, okay, you have to understand that. And big tech knows about this. The billionaire class, the Davos set, the World Economic Forum, they all know this stuff. Right? NATO itself, the EU, they all could have solved these problems. All right? The problem is it's ego, right? And that's why I say it's megalomania, right? Egomaniacal, right? That leads to all this kind of stuff. Profiteering, all that kind of stuff. Hypocrisy for profit. So what? Okay, you got a dictator, you got to figure it out. You got to appease the person. When you got a madman wielding a knife somewhere, okay? Because people wonder, what to do. Cops know this, and you've seen enough movies. You got some crazed guys inside a bank, and then the alarm goes off, and now the bank's surrounded by police cars, and the detectives are there, and they got sharpshooters, and they're all, But you got some maniac in there with hostages and all this kind of stuff, and the person starts killing hostages, just like, war, It's like they negotiate. Now, whether or not they plan to take the person out the moment they get a clear shot or something, it's a different story, but you negotiate, right? And in many cases, it saves lives. Okay, here's the bus. We're going to bring you. You want a bus? Yeah, we've got the plane. We're going to get a plane set up for you at the airport. Here, send us, give us, do this, do that. We'll whatever. You have to negotiate with a madman sometimes. All right? Because that's how you save lives and prevent things like getting out of control. Things over there got out of control. But I'm saying as out of control as things are over there in the east of Europe, because it's not even a NATO or a European issue because Ukraine isn't a member of NATO or the EU. But regardless of the socioeconomic geopolitics of that situation, there's still 40,000 people a week dying here in the U.S., not over there. And there's still several thousand people being murdered in the U.S. every week here. And we're not doing anything about it. And all the media is doing is war on TV, war on TV. Send money to these people, which is going to war-profiteers, right? It's taking me enough time to finally get to the punchline of this whole thing. So another generation, 36,000, 72,000 years ago, whatever, knew about this, weren't idiots like we are, fighting among ourselves, people worried about being called names, right? Revisionist history, right? Blaming somebody from the 1600s for something that somebody didn't even get to the U.S. until their grandparents didn't even get here till after the 1900 or something. You know what I mean? It's like they know nothing of what you're no relations or anything with anything that went on 400 years ago or even during the Civil War, right? My grandmother was born, she's long since passed, but she was born in 1900. Right? Here in the U.S., but I mean 1900. One of my grandmothers. She had nothing to do with anything, and she wasn't British or Dutch. Okay? Who were the slave traders and the colonialists. You see what I mean? So she had nothing to do with anything. Right? No, like nothing whatsoever. All right? She came, I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but I mean, she came from she was from Europe, but I mean, she had nothing to do with that. So you can't point that finger, point that finger at me. But that's what we waste our time with, right? And then we find these people who are loudest about this stuff are just pocketing millions of dollars, making weird real estate deals and taking the donations and using it to buy themselves cars and houses and clothing and living like, the good life. It's pathetic. Really. Makes you sick to your stomach, really, to think about that. Especially since there were probably people that are moved. It's just like with the war thing. Poor people that are moved that like probably donated money that they probably should have used for food or something, for themselves. You see what I mean? And that our country and our politicians and our media are ignoring the people who are dying here, right, from things that are preventable, right, and yet are still advertised on TV, foods and pesticides and bug killers and, all that kind of stuff. And then we allow crime to just run rampant in the country. So assume there was a civilization that didn't waste, their modernity on that kind of crap where we wasted ours and didn't allow their infrastructure to totally, be in disrepair the way we allowed ours. And so they had this idea that, hey, the earth is like a dynamo. We have a magnetic field. We know that magnetic field shields us from cosmic rays and things like that and protects us from the sun. All right. What if we boost that magnetic field, that shield, in effect, create a force field? And so they started to build these obelisks around the planet. And their idea was that they were trying to use the natural energy of the earth. People talk about these ley lines and there's this grid, and you find all these structures around the planet that are all along these same lines, right? And there's all these, these stone structures, ancient structures, things that go way, way back, all right? Some call them prehistoric. And that's what I'm saying. And it was by another civilization, in our distant past, who thought, hey, we could do this. And so what they did was they started to do this and build this thing, but they at some point, as it became close to the event, they realized they weren't going to make it. They couldn't finish it in time and power it up or whatever. And so instead, they decided to put their accumulated knowledge into like the Serapeum, into these boxes under the Sphinx, right? Under the Great Pyramid or certain places, right? Places we don't know about, right? Because these colonial men, these age of of exploration, they've basically absconded with this stuff, and it's in private collections in some European place. And there's some people with cocktail parties. Look at that thing on the wall. I don't know what it is, but wow, isn't it interesting? It's like the secret of saving mankind from destruction, right? And it's like, to them, it's like something they could show off at a cocktail party, right? After, during Davos, after Davos. And so think about that. And, we probably could have done that with our technology, but what were we worried about? Trying to make the cameras better on a smartphone? New apps, right? Charging people, extorting money for people so that they have to pay for cloud to use software every month, right? Overcharging people for electric when electric is really produced very cheaply, right? That's a whole nother story, how electricity is really produced, right? The whole idea of how generators work and how, how power is, stepped up and stepped down, and what transformers really are and all that kind of thing. And people just aren't aware of that. There was never a need actually to put up a single windmill. That's the sad part about it. Unless you're out in somebody out really off grid, right? Same with solar panels. It's like, if you've got like 14 acres and you're off grid, you got enough to put, 36 solar panels up, which is what you're going to need if you want to live a modern life, right? Otherwise, you go to my place, Great Solar Stuff, and you get just what you need so that when the grid falls down, you could just live your life and listen to your music collection and watch an occasional DVD. You should save some. Or still turn on your computer and just use it as a computer, but the internet's going to be gone. Now, that's not necessarily true depending on what that link, that Starlink system is. And I understand there's some people trying to do this peer-to-peer type of internet, in a grid down situation. Because when the grid goes down, it's going to be down forever. So what I'm trying to say is that there was probably a civilization that there were probably several attempts over, eons, so to speak, to prevent this cataclysm from occurring, the one I read to you earlier, that seems to occur with a regular frequency of about 12,000 years. Now, whether or not that's going to happen or not, we don't know. It's scheduled to happen in our time right now. In other words, Vogt has put a date on it of 2046 or something like that. But, we're seeing such magnetic anomalies occurring right now that, anything's possible. And the sun has really been acting up lately, right? And then you take on top of that, you look at the socioeconomic geopolitics of the world and the greed here, right? And this corporatocracy that's replaced, our basically our form of government, our constitutional republic, that, and this failing grid and sewers and water, it's not looking too good, and this runaway inflation and everything else, and the potential for a market crash and all that sort of stuff. And this idea of smash and grab and opportunistic looting and gangs out of control and people dying of unnecessary things, and the FDA simply allowing things with high carbs and sugars and pesticides and stuff to be sold. And there's lawsuits about this stuff all the time, but all they do is slap their wrists, charge them, and they consider it cost of doing business. And if you go to a box store today, you could buy a weed killer or a bug spray that's a known carcinogen, and that there's been multi-million-dollar lawsuits that, where they won and people were compensated for their losses. You see what I mean? That's the kind of world we live in today, unfortunately. And no one's paying attention to any of this stuff. And I have nobody's watching this show. Nobody gives a crap. Right? And so, unfortunately, that's the reality, And so it's not, I'm sorry to say, but, we're heading towards a Mad Max dystopian future. And that's it. And so you have to take care of yourself. And like I say, you really ought to go to my site, ROCKFLUX.com. You want to support this kind of stuff, I'll give you more information and try to help you through this, navigate through this whole thing. Because I believe this is the reality. There's one more day, whether you like to hear this or not, is 15% off of these hoodies, shirts, hats, bags, all kinds of accessories. You got to click on the store link. You could donate to me through PayPal. I am not monetized on YouTube, okay? I don't make any money. And there's a link for great solar stuff also at ROCKFLUX. And there's things there that are power backups that just cost a couple $100. And you could plug it into your house outlet and have that charged, and if the power goes out, it's fully charged. Or you could get a little mini foldable solar panel for that. And if it's a long-term, grid down situation, you'll be able to power that, and you'll be able to you'd be surprised what you could run. Depends on how much you want to put into it. If you want to just know more about my mind, get into my mind, my last 2 books, I wrote 10 books, but Then What and Codex are flows of consciousness, which will give you insight into like my brain, my life. They're kind of companion pieces for these shows over the past year. So visit rockflux.com. Take care of yourself. Consider gardening. I didn't get into that today, but growing your own food, living within a budget. If you get my book, Then What, get the print versions. Don't buy. They're available on Apple Books and they're available on Kindle, but there's a budget page and a worksheet in Then What that would be good for you to make copies of, and you'd be best to use that. They don't translate well in as digital, even though I use the Apple software to make it, all right, and upload it. So buy the print book. It's like $9.95, available on Amazon. I'm trying to do this to help you. This is service to others instead of service to self. All the best. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk